I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the vote on the Smith Amendment as amended to be reconsidered.
Representative Niska moves that we reconsider the vote on the Smith Amendment. Discussion. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
I ask for support.
All those in favor of the motion to reconsider on the Smith Amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. The motion prevails. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that we consider the A18 Greenman secondary.
Representative Long moves that we reconsider the A18 Greenman Amendment. Any discussion? I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Long, for working with us to make this bipartisan bill remain bipartisan. I urge member support.
All those in favor of reconsidering the Greenman A18 amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. No. The motion prevails. The clerk will report the Greenman amendment.
Greenman moves to amend the Smith Amendment to House File Number 4138, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A18.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Long. I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Speaker. Talked a lot about this bill. Just to be clear, what it does is it requires social media companies to report to the BCA when there are potential mass shootings, and there are a number of threat factors. Please, let's have a roll call on this.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Smith.
Members, I would say vote yes, and to all members, I would say be sure you're on the board.
Any further discussion on the amendment, to the amendment? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment to the amendment. Again, do not. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 67 yeas and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment to the amendment is not adopted. Now to the underlying amendment. The clerk will report the underlying amendment.
Smith moves to amend House File Number 4138, the third engrossment as amended, and the Smith Amendment is coded A13.
Discussion to the amendment. I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
Roll call vote, Speaker.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Smith.
So we are now on the underlying amendment as amended. That is a bit more broad for the see something, say something for social media companies. I would ask a green vote.
Any further discussion on the amendment? I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a point, during the break, I had a nice conversation with some of the pages who are, many of them, 16, 17-year-olds. So if we want to see who our votes are impacting today, we have them right in front of us. Thank you.
Further discussion. I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so just to be clear, what we're voting on is the underlying Smith Amendment with the Myers Amendment added. And so I would encourage a no vote, but thank you.
Any further discussion on the Smith Amendment? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 82 yeas and 50 nays, the motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Bonner moves to amend House Bill number 4138, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A14.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Bonner.
Thank you, members. So the A14 was intended to address some technical issues around the bill that potentially open us up to liability on this particular bill, to challenge from a legal perspective, as well as the fact that this language twists ourselves into pretzels, but it doesn't really actually address the underlying way in which the technology actually operates. But the more importantly, what this bill does is it allows us to do some rulemaking with the Department of Commerce to better reflect the way in which technology actually works, to have the flexibility to grow with the way in which the technology might change or ebb and flow. That is what the amendment was intended to do. Unfortunately, there is also a drafting error in the A14 that incorporates some changes that were not intended to be in that technical amendment. It is still my assertion that those technical amendments need to be made, and that if they are not made, that we will face some significant court challenges, as well as potentially opening up a 14-day window in which we are collecting and storing data on children that I think I heard from many of you is not something you would appreciate or desire to do. So with that, I am going to withdraw the A14 amendment for today and ask the authors to strongly consider working to make sure that that rulemaking process be done in the Senate, and that we make those necessary changes to make the bill stronger and defend against legal challenges, as well as address the underlying way in which the technology actually works, which is not reflected in the language of the bill. Thank you.
Representative Bonner withdraws the A14 amendment. There are no further amendments at the desk. The chief clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House Bill number 4138 as amended.
Third reading. Discussion. I recognize the member from Chisago, Representative Reimer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and for all the work that's gone into this bill. One impressive part about this bill is how technically precise it is. We're requesting specific changes to social media platforms, and the stated goal is to reduce the harms impacted through through ongoing social media use for our kids. And one thing I just wanted to point out was that this House can often be a house of hypocrisy, because I recall House File 1434, and we're legislating the technology used in social media addiction, but we couldn't get one Democrat vote in order to do the same thing for pornographic websites. So I just wanted to point out, as we pass this bill on, it sounds like we will today, that we are legislating potential YouTube video views for my kids who want to watch maybe tutorials on how to build Lego sets. But we did not have that same energy for graphic pornographic websites. And I wanted to point out that that is the wrong message to send to Minnesotans today. So I appreciate all the work that's been done on this bill. I wish we would have the same energy and enthusiasm when it comes to regulating graphic, pornographic websites as we take this vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to Representative Scott. I think that this starts to turn the page in the chapter that we've had where big tech companies are allowed to claim that they're helping society with communication, access to information, and helping us be more social. But instead, they've actually been exploiting children exploiting the most vulnerable amongst us. No, kids are not just an ad revenue source. Kids are not a pawn to be made into a potential victim from people, evil people, who are online trying to groom and exploit them. But that's happening every single day right now on platforms as big as Meta and as small as Roblox. That needs to end. We need to put humans first again, not just these tech oligarchs, because that's what they are. This is the start. This is a big, big start. But as we go forward, we should be thinking proactively about how we can get ahead of the curve with some of these technological advancements that, quite frankly, parents are not equipped to fully understand as their kid is advancing so much faster than they ever could. And like I said earlier, I was raised as technology was coming up. I had a flip phone, I had a slide keyboard phone, and then I had an iPhone. And those iPhones, when they first came out, pretty big deal. And now I watch as 10, 11-year-olds know how to work them better than sometimes we even do. And with that comes a lot of potentials for harm. Kids as young as 6 years old being sexually exploited on big tech platforms. And Section 230, defense liabilities, makes it so that they're shielded completely from any responsibility to prevent that harm. It's time that they start working for us again. Thank you to Representative Scott for making that happen.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Feist.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to rise in support of this important legislation. Since I was first elected, issues around technology and their impact on children have been very bipartisan. Worked with Representative Scott on the Student Data Privacy Act and with Representative Robbins on our bill to require schools to come up with a plan for how they're going to approach the impact of cell phones on student behavior, academic attainment, and emotional well-being. So we've done a lot of important work already, and that's always been very bipartisan, and I appreciate that. I was thinking about a conversation I had with a Republican senator about this topic, and he said that, you know, in the past, Democrats didn't trust corporations and Republicans didn't trust the government. But now he's like, I don't know if we trust these big tech companies either. And I was like, well, as a former board member of the ACLU of Minnesota, I never trusted the government or big corporations. So, I don't know. It's nice to see that we are coming into this policy space really united to make a difference. I believe that the fact of passing this bill is as important as the details. With the federal government abdicating its responsibility for our children and to hold these companies accountable, states need to and are stepping up, and I'm just really glad to see that. So thanks to Representative Scott and Representative Smith and Bonner for the work on this important legislation. Thanks.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker. And I agree with both Representative Feist and Representative Engen that, you know, a bill, and particularly the underlying bill that protects kids and their data online, is a really important step. I know that there's been folks who've been working on this for years, and I know that there's more comprehensive work to do, but this is a good first step. And I agree with you, Representative Engen, that these social media companies and these giant tech oligarchs have made it very hard to pass bills like this, regulation that protects kids and, frankly, people from the addictive qualities, from the antisocial qualities, from the qualities that have made this thing in our pockets the most addictive and detrimental technology in a while. And we know that they're hard to pass because of the lobbyists. The thing that we also saw today on this floor is the other big business that makes it very hard to pass bills, and that is the gun industry. And we did not overcome them today. We saw the power of the gun lobby and the gun industry that is pumping billions into selling AR-15s and military-style assault weapons into our communities. But their influence meant that even a provision that simply said that if a part of a threat assessment is whether the threat includes a reference to or a picture or video of a semi-automatic military-style assault weapon as defined in section 624.712. So a reference to current law, that was enough to throw this body into half-an-hour recess and chaos because we couldn't pass a bill with those words in this bill. It didn't even change gun law. It didn't offer the changes that are sitting in that bill that Speaker Demuth is blocking and holding hostage, the comprehensive package that includes so much that our communities are demanding. And so when we talk about what this looks like, we are absolutely in this body taking on big organized interests that do not have the best interests of our kids, of our community, of our public in mind. And it is really unfortunate today that there's only half of us in this body that are willing to stand up to the gun lobby and stand up for the gun industry, stand up to the gun industry, and answer to the people in our communities that are saying, do something about these weapons of war. And so what I hope is that as we go forward, we are looking at those interests that are standing in the way of the public, and we are choosing our kids and communities the way I think this underlying bill does, but we are choosing our kids and communities when it comes from the most dangerous of technologies, which is high-capacity military-style assault weapons and the high-capacity magazines that do so much damage.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, Representative Greenman is so right. This bill, in whatever protection it offers to kids, just pales next to the protection that they really need, that they are not getting in this bill or from this legislature. It's really a shame, but I didn't rise to really speak about that. I have some concerns about this bill, and I appreciate Representative Engen's comments about standing up to the tech oligarchs, which I absolutely agree we need to do. It's not easy, and we need to do it. And I also agree with Representative Engen in saying, when he said that parents are not equipped to deal with this. And so I have a little concern about this bill, that the bill especially is not really helping parents with, I think, where Representative Engen was going with this. So as near as I can really understand, what this bill is doing, first of all, it locates a person using whatever tech uses to locate you. You have to be in Minnesota to be subject to this bill. And then it presumes that you are a child unless the data that the company has shows that you are not, to some level of certainty. And then if you are not shown to be an adult, you have to have parental consent to use that website, that platform. And then the effect of having parental consent, if you get it, is that you get a child account where the addictive features, that I think we all pretty much agree that these addictive features are harmful to children, and those addictive features are limited. And as has been pointed out, it doesn't protect children against everything, just those addictive features. So I actually would like to ask the author to yield. Would Representative Scott yield?
She will yield, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So Representative Scott, given, if I'm correct, as I just kind of described the steps of what this bill is really doing, why do we need the parental consent piece? Why does the bill not just limit the addictive features for all children? Because as we heard from Representative Engen, I think he's correct. Parents don't necessarily have the wherewithal always to understand the technology. There might be, they have to do some kind of contract with the tech industry, as I understand it, under the bill. And if she would yield to that question, then I have a follow-up question.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, Representative Liebling, Chair Liebling, I would say it's a policy choice that we made. We are wanting, I think it's important that parents have some involvement in these decisions for their kids, because I think it empowers the parents to learn more about what their kids are doing, and they can then see what their kids are involved in online. And So I think it was really a policy choice. We're doing our best to empower parents to make those decisions based on whether they think their kid is, they don't have to give the permission and it automatically just shuts the account down. So I don't know if that's a helpful answer or not.
Representative Liebling.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Scott. I did want people to understand that. If the parents don't give permission, this simply shuts the account down, does not let that young person use that platform at all. And if the parent does give permission, it limits these addictive features. But my next question, if she would yield to another question, Mr. Speaker.
She'll continue to yield. Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Representative Scott, if the parent decides to give permission, can the platform require, the parent is going to be having some kind of contract with the platform that's going to be part of this permission structure? And can the platform require a waiver of liability at that point from the parent? In other words, if the child then gets that child account, can the platform then say, oh, if your child, say, harmed themselves because of something they saw on the platform or had some other negative effect, could the parent have been required to waive liability, or is there something in the bill that would prevent that waiver of liability?
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Chair Liebling, I don't think that there's an exact provision in this bill that addresses that. As I said, we tried to think of everything, but we couldn't think of everything. So again, the effective date does not happen until next July. So if that's something we need to look at, I'm more than willing to do that. I mean, there is a private right of action in here if the social media company knowingly lets some of these addictive features through, and the child is harmed.
Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks for that answer. So, yeah, I think it is admirable that we are trying to protect children from these addictive features. But I really think that this bill could be banning addictive features for all children, because you're going to have some parents who, for whatever reason, maybe they feel overwhelmed by this whole thing, maybe they give permission without really thinking it through, without reading all the fine print. I mean, how many of us agree to the terms on a website without reading all the fine print? Probably every single one of us. And it's very easy for big tech to slip things in there, and I think that's a real potential problem with the bill, because as Representative Engen noted, parents aren't always equipped to understand all of this stuff, not from the technology point of it and not from the legal point of it. I mean, I'm an attorney, and a lot of times I've been just like, oh, heck, I'm not going to read this whole thing and just give up. And I'm usually the person who makes everyone wait in line because I'm reading the whole paper in front of me. But you can't do that all the time, the way things move now. I have one other question for you, Chair Scott, and that is if she would yield again.
She will yield. Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Chair Scott, I had asked you in committee and since about the location privacy issue. And as I mentioned at the outset of my remarks here, this bill doesn't function unless the tech company knows where you are, because it only applies in Minnesota. And that is, in fact, built into the definition of account holder, that you have to be a resident of the state. So I want to ask you, I don't think it's in the bill, anything about that. I want to ask you your thinking about that, because obviously privacy for your location is a big, big deal. I mean, I personally try to shut off the location permissions whenever I can. We know that tech has ways of tracking you anyway, and so this is still a concern. This whole thing is based on big tech knowing where you are, where the child is, and so if you could respond to that, please.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chair Liebling. My understanding would be, and I'm not a tech genius, but they would have to go by the IP address when someone is online. And I just want to say, too, that the bill does state that when it comes to the parental consent piece, that it has to be very prominent. So it can't be at the end of, you know, in the midst of 10 pages of legalese that they have to read. It has to be very prominent for the parents to see and to understand. And I think, as I said, we tried to cover as much as we could. This is a good first step. I believe it's going to protect a lot of kids, and there may be some things going forward that we do want to add to tighten it up even more.
Representative Liebling.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Chair Scott. I hope you're right about that. I do think that, you know, we certainly don't want to do nothing. We want to do something because the problem is a really serious problem. And so I appreciate that the bill is trying to do something, and also that when we do something like this, we almost always have to change it and tweak it as we go forward. No big new thing is ever perfect when it comes into being in its first iteration. So, you know, I look forward to helping and seeing this tighten up and get better as time goes by, because I think that it is going to pass today. And I do think this shows that we shouldn't do nothing just because we can't do everything. But I do think it's important to go back to what Representative Greenman was saying before, that, you know, we shouldn't feel too much comfort that we're going to try to protect kids against addictive features in tech, because we're not protecting them at all against the things that threaten them the most, and that is gun violence. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Meeker, Representative Gilman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Social media's business model is addicting our kids, and the current age limits, parental controls, screen time limits that social media companies hold out as solutions to protecting our kids are woefully ineffective. It is not working. I just talked to a resident doctor last night, and he talked about the mental health crisis. And again, we're seeing in our young people self-worth issues, ADD, ADHD on the rise, anxiousness, body dysmorphia, and an incessant need to buy things, from makeup to clothing, certain kinds of clothing, and they have drops on, you know, when you can get it, and oh my gosh, Mom, you didn't set your alarm at this time of night to get this clothing, to buying specialty drinks, you know. They've gotten very creative to feed that underdeveloped part of the brain, the frontal lobe. And I mean, I think back of when I was a child, the TV that we had was probably as wide as the desk that we have here. And I'll never forget, there were certain times that certain shows were on, but we had to have certain things done in our home in order to watch those shows. And if they weren't done, too bad. And this is from my single mom. And I'll never forget, one of my sisters, I will not say her name. I want to so bad because I could say it in the tone that my mom said. We actually had a bird, a myna bird. I'm gonna go just digress a little bit. This myna bird that we got to watch started picking up on things that the bird heard in our home and would say her name the same way my mother would say her name. And so this is for my sweet sister. She proceeded to unplug that TV that was as big as the desk that we have here, take the TV out onto the front porch of our country home, and toss it out into the front yard. And again, it was over. It was done with. My sister has since written a song. It's called When I Was a Child. Then you could find the name of her. You could figure out her name. And it's so beautiful. But in her song, she talks about when I was a child, and we would be out in the cornfields for hours. We'd be out in the woods, you know, and we'd have make-believe homes and, you know, do things, you know, probably climb up ladders and go on roofs that we shouldn't have done. But the adventures that we got to have, the experiences that we physically got to have, and emotionally get to have have just been a huge part of my life, and I'm so grateful. So the fights that parents have in Minnesota over these things, over iPads, and again, there is that piece that we want to protect our children. And we talked about this on the House floor tonight. Would we allow strangers into our home? But we are inviting them through these devices. So I have House File 22 that is tied up in state gov right now, currently, the Parental Bill of Rights. We want to equip our parents. We want to help them. We want to support them to be able to make decisions for their families. And again, we want healthier, happier children. And the things that are happening from the dopamine hits, from the images, from the things that they get to be a part of, even to us adults. And when we're hearing little beeps and noises and how we could be in the middle of a great conversation, but we're really not there. Even as adults, we're not even in the conversation because we hear the noise and our bodies are trained to listen and look. So again, I'm guilty of that as well. So I'm very, very grateful for House File 4138. I'm supportive of this. It's a step in the right direction. Again, I just think that we need to support our kids, support families in Minnesota, and I'm so grateful for this bill. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Bonner.
Thank you. So as we kind of get closer to voting on this bill today, I do want to say it's unfortunate that we didn't accept the piece about age. And I'm just briefly going to tell you what I didn't tell you earlier. I'm going to tell you about Coco and Zach, Trinity, Juliana Arnold, Carter Bremseth from Olivia, Minnesota, and about Gavin Guffey, the son of Representative Brandon Guffey of South Carolina, a conservative legislator out of South Carolina. These are names of kids who are not covered by this bill. These are the names of kids who are no longer with us. These are kids who died because they received pills or fentanyl-laced drugs from someone on a social media platform. They are kids who died of suicide because of sextortion. Representative Guffey is very, very open about talking about his son, Gavin, an incredible young man with a bright future ahead of him. He was 17. He was athletic. He was thoughtful. He was sweet. He began engaging with someone that he thought was a young girl. He sent her pictures, and granted, he probably should have known better, but that's the folly of youth. At 17, he thought he was interacting with a young girl, only to find out that the person on the other end was in fact not a young girl, but someone attempting to release compromising photos to his entire family and friends. Within hours, the issue escalated until he took his own life and was discovered dead on the bathroom floor on a July morning by his parents. But the story doesn't end there. It actually gets worse. 2 weeks after Gavin was buried, his parents got a comment with a laughing emoji, followed by a demand for money for the very photos that his son died over. The sextortionists didn't end their ploy with killing a 17-year-old boy. They didn't feel any remorse. They didn't feel bad. In fact, they actually went to the parents. Imagine that, members. Imagine you've lost your 17-year-old son. You've had to bury a bright young man and his future. And now you have someone trying to ask you for money so that they don't dishonor the memory of your child. He was 17. He would not be covered under the definition of this bill. And neither would Coco or Zach or Trinity or Juliana or Carter. So it's my hope that as we continue forward and we talk about what needs to be changed about this bill, that we have the courage to take on big tech, to take on other folks and say, no, not on our watch, so that kids like Gavin will be safe. And we know that in this, we talked about that playground that exposes things like eating disorders, cutting, depression, physical violence, accidental death, overdose, suicide, self-harm normalization, which the Mayo Clinic does a great deal on in depth here, and sextortion. We also know there are studies that show that under the age of 19, that heavy usage of social media increases the likelihood of depression, suicide, and death under the age of 19. So I think at some point we need to have an honest conversation about making sure that all of our kids are covered. And I want to say that I understand, and we'll talk to the bill at the end, but I want to say that my concerns remain from the beginning of this conversation about parents. And I understand why parents want to be involved in their kids' lives, and I encourage that. I think that's great. But I also think that we have to keep in mind that we are asking parents to become experts on technology, on the ways in which things like algorithms work, and all of those things in tech. And I will be honest, as a 30-year veteran of technology and someone who manages the teams who actually create the software, there are times when I don't fully understand the tech. I'm in the business. I work with the people who build the thing. And I don't always understand. And most parents are busy worrying about whether or not there's pudding cups and healthy snacks in the fridge for their kids and whether they've gone to swimming class and whatever. They shouldn't have to worry about whether we've ensured the protection of their kids online. That should be automatic. Period, the end. We talked a little bit about this idea of a potential of liability shields and whether or not that was considered in the bill. The national experts that deal with constitutional and regular law have not yet been able to get back to me on that question. I will tell you that while it hasn't been considered in this bill, it is in the Kids Code bill, a bill that's been vetted and tested in the courts and has responded and been changed and updated to reflect the changing environment and all of the legal precedent that has come before it. This bill is a new bill. And I'm not suggesting that it's not good. I'm just suggesting that it has never been vetted in any other state before. We will face challenges, and the reality is we will get sued. Now, that's not a reason to not do that today, and that's certainly not a reason to not take the first steps to protect kids. In fact, I would argue we should do it anyway. We should absolutely do whatever we have to do to take those first steps to protect kids. And as I said, many of the things in this bill came right out of the Kids Code bill. I support them. It's why I put my name on this bill. It's why I said I was willing to work with the authors. It's why I've said I've continued to be thoughtful about how we put this together, because frankly, protecting kids online in digital spaces, it's not a bipartisan issue. We all love our kids. We all care about where they are. But as this bill goes to the Senate, we need to be having deeper conversations about that liability and making sure that we are not, as Chair Liebling said, opening up an opportunity in which we've given big tech a shield from harming our kids, because we still haven't addressed the underlying root cause. The playground is still dangerous. And we're basically asking parents to give a permission slip to allow kids into a space that we know isn't fully safe. It was never designed for them, which is why we need to take the next step and pass the design code so that we can force tech companies to build better, safer products by design and by default that are created with kids in mind, that actually address and mitigate the harms of these products before the harm is done, before the next Gavin dies, before the next Coco and Zach and Trinity and Juliana and Carter. There is an entire law firm in this country right now who has a daily stand-up meeting every morning. And do you know what they discuss? They discuss all the cases that came in overnight about children who have died or been harmed by social media every day. Every single day. That's what they do. Parents get referred to them from all over the country, and they keep having these conversations, and we do see the courts are starting to turn the tide. But social media companies have long been given a pass on ensuring that their products are safe. We've given them liability protections in a way in which we do not give to any other industry in this country. But more importantly, we have given them the opportunity to put profit over children. And so as we talk about this today, we need to fix the tech issues so that we're not open to liability, and that this bill isn't going to go down because we can't enforce it. It does no good if we can't enforce it. We will get sued, but I damn well am ready to fight that fight alongside anyone else in this chamber when they come for us. I am more than willing to have that fight to extend that age to 18 so that those 17-year-olds like Gavin have a voice, that their parents have a remedy, because it's worth it. It's worth it. It is a self-righteous fight to have that conversation, and we should. But let us be cognizant as we think about taking these first steps. These are admirable goals set out in this bill. They are good first steps. But what I am going to say to all of you, including all of you on the other side of the aisle who are looking down right now and not looking at me, to keep in mind that next year we need to come back and we need to finish the job. Because I can tell you big tech is hoping we don't. They're hoping we don't pass that kids code or the stronger protections around algorithms. They're hoping we don't raise the age to 18 because right now they can profit off of those kids before they reach the age of consent. So when we vote for this bill today, if you choose to vote in the affirmative, I will expect to see each and every one of you sitting at the committee table next year helping finish the job. I'm not going to tell you which way to vote on this bill today, and you know I know it has challenges. But it's a step. It's a first step. Because this bill, I will end on this note, this is about protecting kids. This isn't a partisan issue. This is about something we all deeply care about. And most importantly, it's time that we tell big tech that we're going to protect kids and not their profits.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and thank you, Representative Scott, for bringing this bill. Like Representative Bonner, I have been working on this issue for at least 6 years. I have a different version of a social media bill. Mine was called SOTA Kids Act, Stop Online Targeting Against Our Kids. And this year it's HF 48. And my approach was a little bit different. It also went to age 18, which I share your views on. And it also really focused in on stopping the recommendation algorithms and focusing in on the publishing function of these social media platforms, because they're currently protected as publishers. And I think these recommendation algorithms go beyond that. And those addictive features are what are crushing our kids. But this bill is a fantastic step. And I'm so grateful to be able to vote for this. And it really does address a lot of the things Chair Liebling was talking about. The privacy settings are set by default at the most maximum privacy settings unless the parent opts to change that. So it is protecting all kids right from the beginning. And that is so important. I am very conservative on this issue because I've seen the harm. A lot of it is what Representative Bonner discussed. If anyone hasn't read the book, Anxious Generation, you should put on your reading list for this summer. Dr. Jonathan Haidt is the author, and he has a website that goes through all the research of social media harms in real time. It's constantly being updated. And it will break your heart how kids are driven into addiction and pornography and eating disorders and suicide ideation and self-harm and anxiety and depression. What these social media companies are doing to our kids and we are allowing is the biggest tragedy, the biggest crime against our kids I can imagine. So I'm so grateful, Chair Scott, for the work you have done on this, for bringing people together to see bipartisan support on this. And I hope this is the first of many steps that this body continues to take to protect our kids from the harm of social media. I am so proud to vote for this bill, and I will be cheering for you guys next year. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Speaker. I kind of have two different speeches that I'm going to have to lump into this one because of the odd places that we went while we discussed this bill. First one, I just want to talk about what happened when we were talking about our amendments to this bill. When we're talking about guns in this space, we use the term common sense gun legislation. And the reason that, at least I will speak for myself, I like to use that term is to recognize that we are trying to find some common ground on that issue, that we can protect Second Amendment rights while also recognizing that there are dangers that guns present to our community that we want to make law to prevent. In our republic, no one's individual liberty is absolute. Everyone has the power or the freedom of speech, but we still have libel laws. Everyone has the freedom for religion, but it is still illegal to practice human sacrifice. We have limits on our freedoms to protect the society at large. And what we saw on one of our amendments is that an amendment that asks social media companies to report to the BCA in Minnesota potential threats, mass killing events, was okay for your caucus until there was just a mention that something in those content would include guns. being so committed to no legislation about guns to the point where you are having objections to Meta reporting to BCA when they see a potential mass shooting that could happen is simply unfathomable to me. But that's what we saw. And I hope Minnesotans see that on that issue, I really do believe your caucus is being not a reliable partner for Minnesotans in making it a safer place. And another reason that not taking up this Senate file is irresponsible. And I think we saw it in the most extreme case. Not even reporting if you see a gun, a picture of a gun and a potential threat. I don't understand. End of speech one. Let's talk about this bill, because I do believe this is a good bill. Members, we should pass this bill. It helps Minnesotan families. It helps Minnesotan children. And I think we haven't talked enough about what this bill is doing. We've talked a lot about what things that it isn't doing. And there's a lot of stuff that we would like to do that we're not doing here. But this bill is doing important things. Minnesotans under the age of 16 will no longer have addictive features on their social media feeds. And we define that very specifically in here. Infinite scrolling, profile-based feed, meaning they're using other information to feed things to our kids, push notifications, autoplay video, personal metrics, awards, and badges. All of those will no longer be a part of the experience of kids under 16 in our state. Think about your feeds right now. How much of your feed is that stuff? Metrics, like how many likes something is getting. Posts from people you don't even know, or groups you don't know, but they're pushing it towards you because it's seen that you liked other things. An autoplay video that catches your attention really quick, and so you watch 15 minutes of something dumb that you realize in 15 seconds you didn't want to watch. But you're addicted, you're wasting time, you're there. None of these things are going to be available for children now if we pass this bill. This is a big win. Privacy settings on children's accounts will be at the highest possible settings that these apps offer, and they cannot be changed. That is huge, because most of the highest privacy settings on things like Facebook means that people who aren't their immediate friends cannot see the content, cannot interact with them. That is huge for kids in our state. And this is a huge win for the data for those children. All children data under the age of 13 is not able in this bill to be sold, transferred, or disclosed in any way in perpetuity. Even when they become an adult, that company cannot use the data that they have collected during their time when they were children. This is a big win. It's not the whole game, but this is a really big win. Thank you for Representative Scott with working with me to get this in a place where I can make this speech. I wish members to vote yes on this.
I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members, for a really meaningful discussion on this bill. And I want to thank all the co-authors on the bill. I want to thank Representative Bonner for your expertise, and Representative Smith. It's been a pleasure working with you. And actually, Representative Stevenson, Leader Stevenson, has been an advocate for children's safety online as well. And so I want to thank, of course, my colleagues and all of you who have asked really good questions and helped to make the bill better. You had a handout of a list of the supporters of this bill, and I think it's such a wide variety of folks. I'll just read from top to bottom the list of signatories here. Enunciation Light Alliance, Division of Indian Work, Dr. Brian Nystrom, Minnesota Catholic Conference, Minnesota Family Council, thank you, Minnesota Indian Affairs Council, Minnesota Unplugged, SAVE, the Suicide Awareness Voices of Education, the Tech Exit, and With All. It's a really wide variety of folks that are supportive, and it's very gratifying. And as has been said, this is the first step. But I think just the fact, I think the thing that excites me the most about, well, there are two things, but one of them is just the design will be so much different for kids that will have social media accounts. And as was already been said, no more ads, no more push notifications, no more infinite scrolling. Remember when you used to be able to scroll to the bottom of your feed and that was it? That doesn't happen anymore for us or for kids. So, and the strongest privacy protections. This is a bill, the second thing that excites me about this bill is the empowering of parents. And I want to make it perfectly clear that this does not let parents off the hook, okay? Parents, this is your opportunity to really engage and in a simple way, really. They're going to make it pretty plain for you to understand how to do this and put through the verification. So I want parents to be on the alert. This is coming your way. And so I want to make that perfectly clear. I think Representative Engen shared with me a podcast, and I listened to it over the weekend, and it talked a lot about a particular platform and how it was just swarming with child predators. And that alone was motivation enough for me to have a bill like this. This one guy, he was a victim himself as a kid. Now he's 22 or 23, and he's telling about how he was groomed, and then all these different instances of these kids that are being taken advantage of that are missing. Some are missing because they've gone to meet these predators. So this bill is going to do a lot to protect our kids. And there's a lot more going forward that we can do. I think this is an excellent start, and I'm so gratified that it's such a bipartisan effort, that everyone in this chamber cares deeply about our kids and what they're exposed to, and we want the best lives for them, and I hope that we can garner a really strong green vote. Thank you, members.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member voting remotely.
Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 132 yeas and 2 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.